Alex's desk was overflowing with love letters again. He pulled out his phone and sent me $20, just like he always did. Hey, do me a favor and toss these? I nodded quietly. That evening, I stood in the dim stairwell, gathering the envelopes to throw into the recycling bin. Right at the bottom of the pile, my eyes caught a soft pink envelope. The signature belonged to the girl Alex secretly liked. The lighting in the stairwell was weak and flickering. I held the letter tightly, hesitating for a long time before tucking it into my bag instead of throwing it away. Sabrina had transferred to the school 2 weeks ago, placed in the class right next to ours. On her very first day, someone posted her photo on the student forum, and she effortlessly claimed the title of school beauty. Even a guy as proud and sought after as Alex could not help admiring her. She's impressive, he had remarked once while glancing out the window. A few days ago, I heard his friends teasing him in the hallway. You're so hard to get. What kind of girl actually catches your eye? Alex leaned against the balcony railing, letting out a lazy, careless laugh. Someone like Sabrina, I guess. He was far too proud to ever make the first move, even when he genuinely liked someone. And now, Sabrina had written him a love letter. The next morning, I arrived at the classroom early. Alex was not there yet. We had been desk mates for 2 years. He was the one who had requested the seat arrangement. He liked that I was quiet, kept to myself, and never caused trouble. He also knew my family struggled financially. Once he realized that, he began asking me to handle small errands for him, using it as an excuse to hand me pocket money. Deep down, I always knew we belonged to entirely different worlds. He was born into privilege, effortlessly sparkling wherever he went. I was the dull stone sitting beside gold, destined never to shine. I waited a short while before Alex walked into the room. He did not look at me, heading straight to his seat and pulling out a practice test. My hand hovered inside my backpack. After a long internal struggle, I called his name softly. Alex. The pen in his hand paused. He lifted his eyelids lazily. Stuck on a math problem? I shook my head. No. I pulled out the pink envelope and slid it across the desk. I missed this one when I threw them out yesterday. Do you want to read it? In the past, Alex would have shaken his head without a second thought and told me to trash it. This time, his eyes fell on the name written across the front. His eyebrows lifted in surprise. He took the envelope, a subtle, rare spark of joy surfacing in his eyes. Thanks, he murmured. A couple of days later, I noticed a bright blue hair tie wrapped around Alex's wrist. Out of nowhere, he turned to me and asked, "What kind of gifts do girls actually like?" I froze, caught off guard. Before I could formulate an answer, a guy from the back row strolled over to our desks. Dude, your desk mate is a total nerd. Asking her about romance is useless. You're better off asking me. Alex's brow furrowed, his voice instantly turning cold. Mind your own business. I remained quiet for a moment before asking in a low voice, "Who are you buying it for?" He looked at me, pausing briefly before uttering a single word. My girlfriend. In that split second, all the strength drained from my body. He and Sabrina were already together. I stared down at the frayed hem of my sweater sleeve, swallowing the lump in my throat. I'm sorry. I didn't know. From that day on, I stopped initiating conversations with Alex. Guilt weighed heavily on my chest, telling me I had no right to stand so close to him anymore. Later that week, I hit a wall while working through a difficult geometry problem. Beside me, Alex spun his pen between his fingers and casually tilted his shoulder toward my desk. He was ready to explain the solution to me. It was an unspoken rhythm we had built over the past 2 years. He was always remarkably quick to spot my quiet moments of distress. Instead of sliding my paper over to him as I usually did, I turned around and whispered to the girl sitting behind me, "Do you mind helping me with this question?" Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alex's body go rigid. A second later, he shoved his chair back and walked straight out of the classroom. That evening, rain poured heavily over the campus. When I reached the ground floor, I ran into Alex standing by the main entrance. He stared at me for a moment. Want to walk together? It would not have been the first time we shared an umbrella. I shook my head politely. No thanks. I left my umbrella in the classroom. I'll just go back up and grab it. Through the curtain of rain, Alex looked down at me, his voice heavy. Is that so? I watched you pack your bag today, he added coldly. I didn't see an umbrella in there. You missed it, I lied quietly. He tightened his grip on the umbrella handle, nodding with an indifferent expression. Right. Whatever you want. We did not speak a single word to each other for the next few days. The silence did not last long, however. One afternoon as the final bell rang, I packed my books and stood up to leave, only to be blocked. Alex extended one long arm against the doorframe, effortlessly trapping me at my desk. I watched as the rest of the class trickled out until the room was completely empty. Only then did he lean down slightly, staring intently at my face. Willow. He rarely called me by my full name in such a serious tone. My heart skipped a beat. Did I do something wrong? His voice was quiet, almost dangerous. What made you so unhappy with me? Alex had done nothing wrong. In fact, he had always taken exceptional care of me. Whenever someone gossiped about me behind my back, he was the first to shut them down. Whenever someone else asked him for help at the same time I did, he always prioritized me. To put it simply, I had always been his exception in this classroom. A girl from another class had even pulled me aside once to whisper, "Willow, why is Alex so protective of you? Does he have feelings for you or something?" I had shaken my head instantly. No, not at all. She had smiled gently. "You know, if you pulled your hair back and pinned your bangs up, you'd be really pretty. Why don't you try it? A guy like Alex only comes around once in a lifetime. Besides, you're right next to him. Don't you know what an advantage that is?" I had stayed silent back then. Now, sitting under his intense gaze, I pressed my lips together. "I'm not unhappy. I just have things to take care of, so I should go." Without waiting for his response, I ducked under his arm and walked out of the classroom without looking back. Halfway down the stairs, I remembered I had left an important review sheet under my desk. I had no choice but to turn back. When I reached the hallway, I saw Sabrina standing outside our door. She was tall, striking, and held an exquisitely wrapped gift box in her hands. I had seen that brand online before. Their cheapest items cost at least 5 figures. "Thank you for the gift," she said, her voice bright and sweet. Alex lowered his eyes. "Glad you like it." Sabrina smiled, stepping a little closer. "I told my dad I want to transfer into your class. Can I sit next to you?" The faint moonlight spilled across the corridor. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs. Alex did not answer immediately. He knit his brows slightly, as if weighed down by a troublesome thought. "We'll see." Sabrina chuckled softly. "What, are you worried nobody will sit with your current desk mate? I heard she's a total recluse." I stood frozen in the shadows, not daring to stay and hear his answer. Turning on my heel, I hurried down the stairs as fast as my feet could carry me. 2 days later, Sabrina officially transferred into Class 1. Our homeroom teacher had left for an administrative meeting, so Sabrina stood alone at the podium to introduce herself. She spoke with effortless confidence, describing her background with poise. A few guys in the back row immediately started whistling and teasing. "Hey Alex, the school beauty came all the way here for you. You taking her out for dinner tonight?" "Yeah man, should we start calling her our sister-in-law now?" Alex let out a quiet, warning scoff. "Keep it down. Don't freak her out." Just then, the homeroom teacher walked back in. He scanned the room before turning to Sabrina. "There's an empty desk in the front row. How about you sit next to Wyatt?" The entire classroom fell dead silent. Everyone in school knew about Wyatt. He was a wealthy, rebellious slacker who did not care about grades or rules. He spent his days causing trouble, or sleeping face down on his desk. Nobody dared to mess with him, and nobody ever voluntarily sat next to him. Yet he could be surprisingly unpredictable. A while back, after driving the teacher crazy, he was ordered to move his desk to the front row, and he had casually complied without a word of protest. A cool breeze swept through the window. I glanced at Alex beside me. He lifted his eyes, looking as though he was about to raise his hand and speak to the teacher. Before he could say a word, I stood up. "Mr. Davis." I spoke up, my voice steady despite the racing pulse in my chest. "I've been struggling to see the whiteboard clearly from here. Can I swap seats with Sabrina?" I was usually the quietest student in the room. This was the very first time I had ever volunteered to speak in front of everyone. Rather than waiting for Alex to gently push me away for her sake, I preferred to take the initiative and step aside first. The teacher pondered for a moment. "All right, that works." At that exact moment, the pen in Alex's hand slipped, clattering loudly against the floor. He made no move to pick it up. Instead, he turned his head to look at me, his eyes dark, carrying an unmistakable trace of mockery. In a voice so low only the two of us could hear, he whispered, "You've been acting so weird lately. Is all of this really because of Wyatt?" Alex was normally distant, cold, and utterly indifferent to the world around him. He rarely showed strong emotions. It was the first time I had ever heard him speak to me in such a sharp, sarcastic tone. I stared at him for a brief second before answering quietly, "This has nothing to do with him. Thank you for everything you've done for me these past 2 years." Hearing those words, Alex let out a faint, cold laugh. He turned his head away and stopped looking at me. I packed my books and moved straight to the front row. Wyatt glanced up at me, lifting a lazy eyebrow with an amused expression. "Willow." I pressed my lips together, slightly startled. Wyatt almost never interacted with the girls in our class, nor did he add anyone on social media. I distinctly remembered a gorgeous girl asking him if she could watch him play basketball a few weeks ago. He had stared at her blankly for a long time before asking, "Sorry, who are you again?" Yet he remembered my name. I gave a small nod. "Yeah." He withdrew his gaze without saying anything else. For the rest of the day, I forced myself not to glance back toward my old seat. But Alex and Sabrina were not sitting far from me. I could constantly hear her light, pleasant laughter. And even Alex seemed to talk far more than usual. I could not make out the details of their conversation. Nor did I want to. When the final bell rang, I let out a long breath of relief. I gathered my things and headed downstairs. Halfway down the stairwell, someone slammed into my shoulder from behind. I lost my balance and tumbled forward, my forehead cracking hard against the iron railing. Pain shot through my head. I reached up to touch the spot, feeling warm, sticky blood on my fingers. I hissed softly from the stinging pain. The very next second, Sabrina's sweet voice drifted down from above. "You fell on your own. Don't you dare try to pin this on me." Her voice was melodious, but the words carried a sharp, nasty edge. I wiped the blood from my brow and looked up at her. "You pushed me." I held out my right hand, pronouncing every word clearly. "Pay for my medical bill." Sabrina froze, staring at me in utter disbelief. "Are you insane? You're actually trying to extort money from me?" I cupped my bleeding forehead and stood up, preparing to confront her, when a familiar, crisp voice echoed from the top of the stairs. "What's going on here?" I turned around and saw Alex standing a few steps away. He was holding a paper bag from a high-end bakery in one hand and a pink backpack in the other. I recognized that backpack. It belonged to Sabrina. The sight stung my eyes like acid. I forced myself to avert my gaze immediately. Beside me, Sabrina immediately put on a pained, spoiled expression, whining to Alex. "It's all your fault for taking so long to buy pastries. Now I'm getting shaken down by your former desk mate." Alex frowned. He looked at the blood running down my forehead, his eyes tightening slightly. He reached his hand out, instinctively moving to brush back my bangs to check the wound. Halfway there, his hand froze in mid-air. He pulled it back. Then I heard him speak in a quiet, measured tone. "Really? She's not the kind of person who makes up lies for money." He was defending me. Yet for some reason, the defense only made my chest ache with an overwhelming sense of humiliation. Sabrina pouted, thoroughly displeased. "Why are you taking her side? She literally just demanded money from me. I saw your phone messages with her, Alex. You've been sending her money constantly. Someone as desperate for cash as her wouldn't hesitate to pull a scam like this." Hearing those words, Alex's eyes shifted. He looked at me, his gaze growing dark and distant. I shook my head, squeezing out a faint whisper. "It wasn't like that." He did not intend to listen to my explanation. Instead, he took a step back, putting distance between us. When he looked at me again, his eyes were completely stripped of warmth. "Was this really necessary, Willow?" 5 short words. I understood exactly what he meant. He was asking me why I had sunk so low for money. He was telling me that even if I was facing a sudden financial crisis, as long as I asked him, he would have helped me out of pity for our past connection. I opened my mouth, desperate to explain myself. Opposite us, Sabrina casually took the bakery bag from his hand, pulled out a pastry and took a small bite. So sweet," she purred. Yes, she was perfect. Her entire life was sweet and easy. I came from poverty, and I had accepted so much of Alex's charity over the years that it was only natural for people to look down on me. Whatever I did, it would always look pathetic in their eyes. So I said nothing. I gave Alex one final, quiet look, turned around, and walked away without looking back. I went to the clinic alone. By the time the nurse finished cleaning and bandaging my forehead, it was already past 10 at night. When I reached my small apartment, I pulled my phone from my bag and turned it back on. A notification popped up immediately. A little while ago, Alex had transferred $1,000 to my account. Below the transfer, he had left 2 messages. "Sabrina is a sweet girl. She doesn't have bad intentions. Let's just drop what happened today and never bring it up again. Even if we aren't sitting together anymore, you can still handle errands for me. I'll continue to pay you." Staring at the screen, a numb chill spread through my chest. Truth be told, I owed him a lot. The tasks he used to assign me were always trivial things, throwing away letters, filling his water bottle, or picking up packages. Yet every single payout was enough to cover a month of my living expenses. I could no longer bring myself to accept his charity in such a humiliating way. After a long pause, I typed out a reply. "There's no need. If you're worried your girlfriend will misunderstand, you can delete my contact." His reply came back almost instantly. "Misunderstand what?" A knot tightened in my throat. Right. To him, I was nothing more than a convenient classmate he pitied. I typed back. "Nothing. I'm going to sleep." I waited for a few minutes until his final message appeared. "Okay." I stared at that single word until my eyes burned with tears. The wound on my forehead throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. Just as a tear slipped down my cheek, a new notification popped up at the top of the screen. It was a friend request. "I'm Wyatt." I blinked in surprise, tapping the accept button. He got straight to the point. "I heard you take cash to handle errands." I paused, thinking it over. It was true, though I had never done it for anyone other than Alex. But an opportunity to earn money was not something I could afford to turn down. I typed back, "Yes. What do you need me to do?" Instead of texting, He sent an audio message. Through the speaker, his voice sounded lazy, carried with a casual, slightly careless tone. Cool. Grab me breakfast tomorrow morning. The next morning, I arrived at the classroom holding 2 bags of breakfast. Alex happened to be walking through the front door at the exact same time. At first, his expression was distant and cold. But when his eyes landed on the breakfast in my hands, his eyebrows lifted slightly, the corner of his mouth curving into a subtle, satisfied smirk. He reached his hand out toward me. Thought you said you weren't doing errands anymore? Why'd you bother buying me break? Before he could finish his sentence, Wyatt strolled past him. Wyatt reached out and effortlessly snatched the bags right out of my hand. He peeked inside, giving a low nod. Not bad. Thanks. Without glancing at either of us, Wyatt headed straight for his desk. Students were trickling into the classroom, chatting and laughing around us. Alex lowered his gaze, staring at me intently, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His jaw tightened. So, that was for him. There was no reason to lie. I met his eyes and nodded. Yes. The moment the word left my mouth, Alex let out a sharp, cold laugh. He offered no further explanation, brushing past my shoulder and walking straight to the back row. I stood in the doorway, quietly staring at the floor. A moment later, a loud crash echoed from the back of the room. A chair had been kicked violently to the ground. It was Alex. He seemed to be snapping at someone nearby, his temper flaring dangerously. The bell's about to ring. Are you deaf? I did not turn around to look, but I could hear 2 girls behind me whispering in hushed tones. What's up with Alex today? Why is he in such a terrible mood? Oh, I think a guy from Sabrina's old class was sitting in his seat, chatting with her. Alex probably got jealous. Wow, even a guy as composed as Alex gets reckless when he's in love. Is this what they call a prince falling off his pedestal? I tuned out their voices, walking to my desk and pulling out my notebook. As I lifted my head, a small box of medical tape and a fresh band-aid appeared in front of my face. Wyatt leaned back in his chair, his tone offhand. Hey, the cut on your forehead is bleeding through the old bandage. Change it out. He did not ask me how I got hurt. He simply offered a solution without prying into my business. A sudden wave of warmth washed over me, making my eyes sting again. I took the band-aid from his hand and looked at him earnestly. You're a really good person. Before this, I had been somewhat terrified of him, given his notorious reputation for having a short temper. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting golden rays across our desks as the teacher walked in. Amidst the soft rustle of textbooks, Wyatt gave a quiet, amused chuckle. Right. For the next 3 weeks, my routine settled into a steady, predictable rhythm. Every morning at 6:40, I would stop by the small breakfast stall outside the east gate to pick up 2 meat buns and a cup of fresh soy milk for Wyatt. In return, he never transferred random lump sums to my phone like Alex used to. Instead, he would drop a crisp, exact $20 bill on my desk every Friday afternoon, folded into a neat little square. Your wage for the week, Wyatt would say, leaning back in his chair with his baseball cap tilted low over his eyes. Count it. Make sure I'm not shortchanging you. You never shortchange me, I told him one Tuesday, carefully putting the bill into my small cloth coin purse. Good. Don't let people stiff you for your time, Willow. Labor costs money. He didn't make me throw away his trash. He didn't ask me to fill his water bottle or carry his heavy sports bag. Once, when a classmate tried to toss an empty soda can onto our desk for me to recycle, Wyatt caught the can midair, crushed it flat with one hand, and threw it right back at the boy's chest. You got 2 working hands, don't you? Wyatt asked, his voice low and dangerous. Use them. The boy turned bright red, mumbled an apology, and scurried away. From that day on, no one in class 1 dared to treat me like an errand girl. Meanwhile, 3 rows behind us, the atmosphere was growing increasingly suffocating. Alex and Sabrina sat together, but the initial sweet novelty had begun to rot. From the inside out, Sabrina was demanding. She wanted fresh flowers on her desk every morning, expected Alex to carry her books between classes, and constantly pouted whenever he got lost in his own thoughts. And Alex was getting lost in his thoughts constantly. Whenever I turned around to hand in homework or ask the teacher a question, I would feel his dark, heavy gaze burning into my back. One Thursday afternoon during self-study, the math teacher handed back our advanced calculus mock papers. I scored 98 out of 100, ranking first in the grade. Wyatt, on the other hand, scored a miserable 32. He stared at his paper, spinning his black pen with effortless speed, not looking bothered in the slightest. Hey, he murmured, nudging my elbow. Tutor me on question 14. I'll pay your hourly rate. You don't need to pay me for homework questions, I whispered back, turning my notebook toward him. Look here. If you substitute the variable in step 2, you can eliminate the denominator. Before I could finish, a shadow fell across our desks. Alex stood there, his face completely expressionless, holding a stack of reference materials. Willow, he said, his voice clipped in tight. Mr. Davis asked the top 3 students to organize the provincial competition binders in the faculty room. I glanced up. I'm helping Wyatt with a problem right now. I'll go in 5 minutes. Alex's jaw tightened visibly. The teacher asked for it now. Not in 5 minutes. Beside me, Wyatt stopped spinning his pen. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his long legs, and looked up at Alex with a lazy, mocking smirk. Didn't you hear her, top student? Wyatt asked, tilting his head. She said, she's busy. Why don't you go carry the binders yourself? It's not like your hands are broken. I'm talking to Willow, Alex spat, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. Not you. And she's my desk mate, Wyatt countered smoothly, not backing down an inch. So if you're going to bark, bark somewhere else. The entire classroom fell dead silent. Students held their breath, glancing between the 2 boys. Alex was the golden boy of the school, brilliant, wealthy, disciplined, and untouchable. Wyatt was the untamable delinquent from the prominent Vance family, reckless, feared, and completely indifferent to authority. Alex's hands balled into fists at his sides. He took half a step forward, his knuckles whitening. Alex. Sabrina's voice cut through the tension. She hurried over from the back row, linking her arm possessively through Alex's elbow, giving me a sharp, venomous glare before turning her sweetest smile on Alex. Alex, why are you bothering with them? Mr. Davis said I could help you with the binders. Let's just go. Alex didn't move. He kept his eyes locked on mine, waiting for me to say something, to step between them like I always used to smooth things over and follow him out the door. For 2 years, I had always dropped whatever I was doing the moment he called my name. I looked at him calmly, picked up my black ballpoint pen, and turned back to Wyatt's worksheet. Over here, Wyatt, I said, pointing at the diagram. If you draw an auxiliary line from point C, the triangle becomes isosceles. Alex let out a short, ragged breath. Without another word, he wrenched his arm out of Sabrina's grasp and stormed out of the classroom, slamming the back door so hard the glass pane rattled in its frame. Sabrina stomped her foot in frustration, glaring at me with raw hatred before running after him. Beside me, Wyatt let out a quiet, amused chuckle. Auxiliary line, huh? He murmured, tapping the paper with his knuckle. You're pretty ruthless when you want to be, little desk mate. I'm just teaching you math, I replied quietly, though my heart was pounding against my ribs. Right, Wyatt smiled, his dark eyes sparkling with something genuine and warm. Keep teaching. I'm all ears. A week before the midterm examinations, our school announced the annual National Merit Scholarship nominations. For students from ordinary backgrounds, this scholarship was a life-changing opportunity. It carried a $10,000 cash grant and guaranteed a direct recommendation letter for top universities in the capital. I had spent months preparing my portfolio, gathering certificates from academic competitions, volunteer logs, and teacher recommendations. On Friday morning, I placed my completed blue folder into the application box inside the dean's office. By Monday afternoon, the dean summoned me. When I walked into the sunlit office, the dean was sitting behind his mahogany desk looking troubled. Beside him stood Sabrina, dressed in an immaculate white cashmere cardigan, holding a cup of hot tea with a delicate, innocent smile. Willow, the dean began, clearing his throat awkwardly. There seems to be an issue with your scholarship application. My stomach dropped. What kind of issue, sir? The dean pulled a sheet of paper from a folder. Another applicant submitted an anonymous report regarding the volunteer hours and competition credentials you listed. Upon our preliminary review, your original certificate for the Provincial Chemistry Olympiad was missing from your file. That's impossible, I said, my voice rising slightly with panic. I placed the original certificate inside the transparent plastic sleeve on page 4. I checked it 3 times before dropping it in the box. Sabrina sighed softly, placing her teacup on the saucer with a gentle clink. Willow, it's okay to admit you were desperate, Sabrina said, her tone dripping with performative pity. Everyone knows your family is struggling, but forging competition records for scholarship money is a serious ethical violation. If word gets out, it will ruin our school's reputation. I didn't forge anything. I turned to her, my nails digging into the palms of my hands. I won second prize in the provincial competition last October. Alex was the team leader. He was standing right beside me on the stage when we received our medals. Was he? Sabrina tilted her head, a small, triumphant smirk dancing at the corner of her lips. Why don't we ask him? The office door opened and Alex walked in. He was wearing his clean school uniform, his hair neatly combed, his expression as unreadable and distant as ever. Alex, the dean said, gesturing to the chair. You were the captain of the chemistry team last semester. Can you confirm if Willow was an officially registered participant in the final provincial round? I looked at Alex, my eyes pleading with an intensity one couldn't hide. He knew. He had spent 3 weeks staying after school in the laboratory with me, drilling synthesis problems until the janitor came to lock the doors. He had bought me a carton of warm milk on the morning of the exam when my hands were shaking from low blood sugar. Alex glanced at me. His eyes were dark, clouded with an exhaustion that had become permanent over the last month. Then his gaze shifted to Sabrina, who was casually twirling the bright blue hair tie around her wrist, the hair tie he had bought her. The competition roster required 3 primary members and 1 alternate, Alex said slowly, his voice flat and even. Willow was listed as the alternate. I'm not certain if her final paper was formally scored by the committee. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The alternate. I had written the entire theoretical portion of our team's project. When the second string member came down with acute appendicitis on the morning of the exam, the faculty advisor had officially bumped me up to the active roster. Alex had signed the paperwork himself as team captain. He was lying. He was deliberately omitting the truth, throwing me under the bus to protect Sabrina's nomination. I see. The dean nodded gravely, writing a note in his ledger. In that case, without the physical certificate to verify her active participation, Miss Thorne's application must be disqualified for irregular documentation. Dean Miller, please. I stepped forward, tears burning hot behind my eyelids. That will be all, Miss Thorne, the dean said firmly, waving his hand. You may return to class. Sabrina picked up her luxury leather backpack, offering the dean a sweet, practiced bow. Thank you for being so fair, Dean Miller. I stood there in the center of the office, unable to move, feeling the cold air conditioning seep into my bones. Alex lingered by the door. As Sabrina stepped into the hallway ahead of him, he stopped beside me, his voice dropping into a harsh, tight whisper. If you need money that badly, Willow, you could have just asked me. You didn't have to fight Sabrina for it. I turned my head and looked at him. For 2 years, I had thought he was a distant star, bright and untouchable. Someone whose quiet kindness was a sanctuary in my bleak, impoverished life. Now looking into his eyes, I saw only a small, arrogant coward who would rather crush someone else's future than admit his own petty spite. Alex, I said, my voice steady, stripped of all warmth, all hurt, all reverence. You are the most pathetic person I have ever met. His face drained of color as if I had slapped him across the cheek. I walked out of the administration building and stood on the concrete steps, the autumn wind biting through my thin uniform sweater. I didn't cry. Crying was a luxury for people who had someone to comfort them. Hey. A black leather jacket landed heavily over my shoulders, instantly blocking out the cold breeze. I turned around. Wyatt was leaning against the stone pillar, holding an unlit cigarette between his fingers. His collar was turned up against the wind, his sharp jawline set in a grim, furious line. Did they pull your name? He asked. My certificate went missing from the folder, I said, pulling the jacket tighter around myself. The leather smelled faintly of cedarwood and mint. Alex told the dean I was only an alternate. Wyatt let out a low, dark scoff. He tossed the unlit cigarette into a nearby recycling bin, pushed himself off the pillar, and grabbed my wrist. Come on. Where are we going? To get your certificate back. He dragged me across the central courtyard toward the school's security control center behind the gymnasium. The security office was normally restricted to staff, but the elderly guard on duty looked up, saw Wyatt, and immediately stood up with a nervous, respectful nod. Young Master Vance, what can I do for you? Pull up the hallway cameras outside the dean's office from Friday afternoon. Between 5 and 6, Wyatt ordered, leaning his hands on the console. And check the stairwell camera on the second floor of the science wing from 3 weeks ago. The guard hesitated. Sir, student records require administrative authorization. Wyatt pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. A deep, authoritative voice answered on the first ring. Wyatt, is something wrong at school? Uncle, Wyatt said casually. Tell the head of campus security to let me look at the surveillance tapes for 10 minutes, or I'm telling grandfather you're hiding 3 vintage sports cars in the south warehouse. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. Put the guard on. 30 seconds later, the security guard was typing frantically on the keyboard. The screen flickered, showing high-definition footage of the corridor outside the dean's office from last Friday at 5:20 p.m. The hallway was empty until a slender figure in a designer skirt walked up to the application box. Sabrina reached inside with a pair of long tweezers, pulled out my blue folder, opened it, and slid a thick white paper into her pocket before dropping the folder back in. Pause, Wyatt commanded. He tapped the screen with his finger. Print 3 copies of that frame with the timestamp. Now pull up the stairwell footage from the 15th. The second video loaded. It showed the dim stairwell between the second and third floors. I was walking down the steps with my binder. Sabrina came running down from behind, deliberately extending her arm and shoving my shoulder with full force, sending me crashing headfirst into the iron railing. The footage clearly showed her stepping over my bleeding body, laughing into her phone as she walked away. The guard stared at the monitor, his mouth hanging open in shock. Export both files to this thumb drive, Wyatt said, tossing a black metal USB drive onto the desk. Now. The next morning, the entire school gathered in the main auditorium for the weekly administrative assembly. Over 1,000 students sat in rows of folding chairs beneath the bright stage lights. On the elevated stage, Dean Miller stood at the podium, adjusting his microphone. Before we begin our academic announcements, the dean's voice echoed through the high-grade Bose sound system. We will formally present the recipient of this year's National Merit Scholarship nomination. This award represents not only academic brilliance but moral integrity and community leadership. Please welcome our transfer student, Miss Sabrina Hayes. Applause rippled through the auditorium, led by the students in the front rows. Sabrina stood up gracefully from her seat in Class 1, smoothing the pleats of her custom-tailored uniform skirt. She smiled with radiant, effortless charm, walking up the stage steps like a princess ascending her throne. Alex sat in the second row, watching her, but his hands were clasped tightly in his lap, his knuckles pale and bloodless. Sabrina reached the podium, bowing demurely to the school board members and taking the embossed certificate from the dean's hands. Thank you, Dean Miller, distinguished faculty, and my wonderful classmates. Sabrina spoke into the microphone, her voice melodic and sweet. Integrity has always been the cornerstone of my family's values. I promise to uphold this honor and represent our school with dignity. Suddenly, the massive LED projection screen behind the podium flickered with static. The prepared PowerPoint presentation showing Sabrina's profile vanished. In its place, a crystal-clear, 60-foot-wide video appeared. The entire auditorium went dead silent. On the screen, Sabrina's face was rendered in terrifying clarity as she shoved me down the iron stairwell, watching me bleed onto the concrete with a cold, disgusted sneer. Before anyone could scream, the video split into 2 panels. The second panel played the surveillance footage from outside the dean's office, showing Sabrina using tweezers to extract my provincial chemistry certificate from the Dropbox, stuffing it into her designer handbag with a satisfied smirk. The audio from the stairwell played through the auditorium speakers with deafening volume. You fell on your own. Don't you dare try to pin this on me. And then, a second audio recording chimed in, a recording from the girls' restroom 3 days ago. Did you really think Alex likes you, Willow? He only bought me that hair tie to make me happy. He doesn't give a damn about a charity case like you. That scholarship is mine, and there's nothing a poor beggar can do about it. The collective gasp from 1,000 students shook the rafters of the auditorium. Teachers jumped from their seats. Board members stood up in outrage, their faces turning beet red. Turn it off. Turn that screen off right now. Dean Miller roared into his microphone, his hands trembling with horror as he looked at the school trustees. In the front row, Sabrina stood frozen on the stage, the embossed certificate slipping from her paralyzed fingers and fluttering onto the floorboards. Her face went from glowing and radiant to a putrid ash gray within 3 seconds. No, that's not real, Sabrina shrieked, backing away from the podium, her voice cracking into a high, hysterical screech. It's an AI deepfake. Someone hacked the projector. Alex, tell them it's a lie. In the second row, Alex slowly stood up. He didn't look at Sabrina. He turned around, his eyes sweeping across the sea of students until they landed on the back row. There, sitting in the very last seat of the auditorium, Wyatt was leaning back, with his arms draped over the back of the chairs, tossing the black USB drive casually between his hands. Beside Wyatt sat me. My back was straight, my hands resting calmly on my lap, my face completely free of fear, anger, or distress. Alex's breath hitched in his throat. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Sabrina was not a gentle, refined fairy who needed his protection. She was a petty, malicious thief who had used him as a tool to crush the only person who had stood faithfully by his side for 2 long years. Alex, Sabrina pleaded from the stage, tears finally streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. Help me. Alex looked up at her on the stage. For the first time, he saw the hideous cruelty beneath her polished exterior. I won't help you, Alex said. His voice was not loud, but through the tense silence of the room, it carried to the ears of dozens of students around him. He turned his back on her, stepped into the aisle and walked toward the exit, ignoring the chaos erupting behind him. The fallout was swift, brutal, and total. By noon, the Municipal Education Bureau had intervened. Sabrina Hayes was stripped of all academic nominations, suspended indefinitely, and formally expelled by the Board of Trustees before the end of the week. Her father, a prominent corporate director, was forced to issue a public apology to protect his firm's stock value, pulling her out of the city entirely to attend a private boarding school abroad. My scholarship nomination was restored, signed and stamped with an official apology from Dean Miller himself. On Friday afternoon, the final bell rang, signaling the start of the winter break. The classroom emptied quickly as students rushed home to pack for the holidays. I was carefully packing my calculus notes into my backpack when a shadow blocked the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. Alex stood at the edge of my desk. He looked terrible. The clean, arrogant posture was gone. His hair was messy, dark purple circles hung beneath his bloodshot eyes, and his uniform jacket was wrinkled. "Willow," he whispered, his voice hoarse and raw. I didn't stop packing. Yes. He pulled a small, velvet box from his pocket and set it gently on my desk. Inside was a delicate silver fountain pen, engraved with my initials in elegant cursive. "I bought this for you 3 months ago," Alex said, his lip trembling slightly. Before any of this happened. "For your birthday. I was too proud to give it to you." I looked at the silver pen, then looked up into his eyes. "Take it back, Alex." "Willow, please," he choked out, taking half a step closer, reaching out with shaking hands as if he wanted to grab my sleeve. "I was wrong. I was an idiot. I thought you were pulling away from me, and it made me crazy. I let Sabrina stay because I wanted to see if you would get jealous. I wanted you to look at me the way you used to." "I don't look at people who treat me like charity, Alex," I said calmly, zipping up my backpack. "It was never charity," he cried, his voice breaking into a ragged sob. "I liked you. From the very first day you sat next to me. I asked for that seating arrangement because I couldn't stop looking at you. I gave you money for errands because I knew your pride would never let you accept a direct gift. Why can't you see that?" I stood up, slinging my backpack over one shoulder. The classroom was quiet, save for the soft whistle of the winter wind against the glass. "If you liked me, Alex," I said softly, looking straight into his eyes, "you would have respected me." His breath caught. "You wouldn't have handed me your trash. You wouldn't have tossed $20 bills at me like I was a stray dog. You wouldn't have watched me bleed on the stairs and asked if I was extorting money. And you wouldn't have lied to the dean about my competition paper just to stroke your own bruised ego." Tears spilled over Alex's cheeks, hot and bitter, running down his pale face. "I was stupid. I can change, Willow. Let's sit together again next semester. I'll tutor you every day. I'll buy you whatever you need. I'll never talk to another girl." "I don't need your change, Alex," I interrupted, stepping around him toward the door. "Because I don't need you. Willow." He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip desperate and cold. Before his fingers could fully close, another hand clamped down on his forearm. Like an iron vice, Wyatt stood behind us, his eyes burning with lethal, predatory intent. With a single, violent twist of his wrist, Wyatt forced Alex's hand off me, shoving him backward against the whiteboard with a loud, hollow thud. "Touch her again," Wyatt growled, stepping into Alex's space, "and I'll make sure you can't hold a pen for the rest of your life." Alex gasped for air, clutching his bruised wrist, staring at Wyatt with raw, helpless fury. "Who are you to her?" Alex screamed. "You're just a delinquent who sleeps through class. You don't know anything about her." Wyatt turned around, looked at me, and smiled, a soft, effortless smile that made the winter chill completely disappear from the room. "I know she likes 2 meat buns with soy milk every morning," Wyatt said calmly. "I know she draws tiny stars in the margins of her geometry notes when she's bored. And I know she deserves someone who doesn't make her hide in the shadows." He grabbed my hand, interlocking his warm, callous fingers with mine. "Let's go, Willow. The snow is starting." We walked out of the school gates together. The first soft flakes of winter snow were drifting down from the gray sky, coating the bare branches of the oak trees in delicate white lace. Wyatt pulled his motorcycle helmet from the handlebar of his sleek black bike and carefully placed it over my head, fastening the chin strap with practiced gentleness. "Hey," I said through the clear visor. "Yeah, how did you know about the stars in my geometry notes?" Wyatt paused, his hands resting on the motorcycle handles. A faint, rare blush crept up the back of his neck beneath his dark hair. He cleared his throat awkwardly, looking away at the falling snow. 2 years ago, he muttered in a low voice. "During the sophomore orientation assembly, you sat 3 rows ahead of me. You were wearing an oversized blue sweater that was frayed at the cuffs, and you spent the entire 2-hour speech drawing constellations on the back of your admission ticket." I stared at him in surprise. I've been watching you for a long time, Willow, he said, turning back to meet my eyes, his gaze steady, fierce, and entirely honest. I just waited until you realized you were too good for a boy who only knew how to look down on you. My heart gave a strange, violent flutter inside my chest. A warm, radiant smile broke across my face, the first genuine smile I had worn in months. Wyatt. What? Take me to get meat buns. Wyatt laughed, a clear, ringing sound that echoed down the snowy avenue. Hold on tight, desk mate. I wrapped my arms securely around his waist, leaning against the warm leather of his jacket as the motorcycle roared to life, carrying us smoothly into the bright, open expanse of the winter city. Behind us, standing beneath the dim street lamp outside the school gates, Alex stood alone in the freezing snow, clutching a velvet box that would never be opened, watching the red taillights disappear into the distance until the road was entirely white.